Hey friends, and welcome to the Starcraft Solo 101 Chapter 5, Drawing with the Pen. This is the first look that you're really going to get at our CRICUT software, and I'm so excited to show you how to do this. The reason we start with drawing with the pen is so that you can really get used to using your machine before you put the blade in. Putting the blade in wrong and using the machine wrong can damage the machine if you have the blade in, so I highly recommend drawing with the pen for a while to get used to using your machine. I'm so excited to show you guys how easy it is and how fun this really is, so let's get started. This is a really important step that I want to make sure that you don't skip when starting work with your Starcraft Solo. We're going to do some test drawing. That way you kind of get used to where your mat needs to sit and where you need to place things and how to place them on the mat before using your blade, because your blade, if set wrong, could damage your machine or damage your mat or your materials. So starting with the pen is a great option. So what we're going to do is go over a few of the things on the screen here, and I'm going to show you really quickly how to draw and kind of why it does what it does. So the first thing that I want to show you is this little arrow up here at the top of your screen. That is actually the portion of the mat that goes into your machine, but the Starcraft Solo actually starts all of its work down in this corner. So unlike the Silhouette and the CRICUT where we're used to the upper left corner, this does the lower right corner. So that's something to be really aware of when you are working with this. Now the next thing is looking at the orientation. Right here we have this orientation, which we can do in vertical or horizontal, so landscape or in portrait. Now 99% of the time portrait is what you're going to be used to if you print documents and things. Landscape is done a lot when you're using something that's a little bit more wide than it is tall. I prefer to do the regular old portrait for myself, and you'll see that when I set this up that it will depend on which way it draws, depending on which orientation you choose. Now we're just going to use a picture from the library. Just go into Window and click Library, and it's going to open a bunch of different shapes that you can use. There's tons and tons of different shapes and styles and all sorts of great stuff to use, but we're actually going to use an arrow for this one just so that you can see a little bit easier which way it kind of draws it. So I'm just going to pick this arrow right here, and you can close out your library when you're done using it. To resize your arrow, you can use this little square down here, but you are going to want to hold Shift if you want to keep the proportions. If you don't hold Shift, you'll see that you can move the proportions really kind of any way you want to. You can make it long, lots of options. Now let's say I did that, I accidentally changed my proportions and I didn't want to do that. Just click the little undo button up here at the top. Now I am going to orientate this guy down in the corner so it's a little bit easier for everybody to see what we are doing. Now because we are going to draw our little arrow here, I want to make sure that I go to these three lines with the dots on it and change my cut line type to draw. You want to make sure that that is selected so that it knows that it's using the pen tool. Now we can click Create, and we're going to set this up to draw our pen or our arrow. Now you'll notice that nothing is showing on our screen. The reason for that is it still has the cut line type listed as cut, and it should be listed as draw. Once we change that, it shows our arrow, and you'll note that it shows it in the bottom of our mat. So again, this is going to load a little bit differently than some of the typical machines that you're used to. I'm going to show you guys how to load this machine, and then we're going to come back and hit the Create button so that it will draw our image. You'll see here we have our Solo mat down on our surface. So what you'll want to do is line your mat up with any of the grid lines. It really doesn't seem to matter where I've lined it up, but I like to just line it up a couple clicks down from the top of the mat, and then I'm going to go ahead and press it down. Now I will say lessons were learned when working with this the first time. You'll see that I have some ink over here. I did make some mistakes, but mistakes are to be expected when you are working with new machine and new software. So just be aware that you're gonna need to really take your time, learn how to use this, and don't fret if you mess up somewhere. So this step is super important. That way you can kind of get used to using it. I'm gonna show you guys how to install the pen, and then I'll show you how to put the mat in, and then we can draw. So as you'll recall from previous chapters, you'll have this little piece right here, which is your blade and your pen holder. Now before I put my pen in, I am going to load my mat. The reason I'm doing that is so I can make sure that my pen is sitting in a proper area. So what I do is I put my mat all the way to the side, and you'll see that you have these grippy rollers. You'll want to make sure that those are lifted up so that you can fit your mat under them, and then you want to put your mat almost all the way in till you can kind of see where it's lining up with this holder. And you can use these buttons to move them over. I'll move it over here in just a moment for you, but for now I'm going to show you how to put the pen in. So here is your pen, and you can see it's got the pen tip there, and all I've done is just dropped it into my holder. When you do this, you're going to need to turn this dial here, the silver one, but you're going to lift the pen up just a little bit. You don't need to lift it up a ton. You're going to go ahead and turn this clockwise to tighten it, and it's going to tighten around your pen, but you want to lift your pen up just a little bit so that you can easily not touch the mat. You can see I'm touching the mat now. I'm going to lift it up just a smidge and make sure that I'm not touching the mat, and then I'm going to tighten this down so that it holds my pen in place. You can see my pen doesn't move now. So now what I want to do is I'm actually going to use the arrows on my screen to move the housing over, and I'll show you guys that. We are going to use these arrows over here to move our housing so that it's over on the paper. Now there's two modes. There's fast mode, which you can see it moves pretty quickly, or you can also turn on a slower mode by just hitting the middle buttons, and it'll move much slower now. So you can really figure out where you want it, and then this will move your mat in and out as well. So if I want to pull my mat in a little bit more, I can do that. And you'll see how my mat here is lined up with my tool. So I'm going to go ahead and move this over just a smidge, and then let's go ahead and do a real quick test run. So all I'm going to do is hit test, and all it's going to do is draw a little square and a little circle. So I'll go ahead and move this out a little bit so we can take a look and see how it drew a square and a circle. That's a great way to test to make sure that it is going to do what you need it to do. And then I'll just pull this back in, and we'll go back over to the machine and hit the create button. Once we've done that little test run, we can just hit the create button and it will draw out our arrow. Now because we are drawing, it does ask us a few things, but all you really need to do is just click draw. My machine gives me a nice little alarm when it's done. You can turn that on or off in your settings, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to move you guys out of the way a little bit here, and let's unload our mat. And now you'll see that you have a fantastic drawn arrow. This is a great way to learn more about your machine and really get to practice. I hope this was a helpful tutorial for you on how to draw with the Solo. This is a great way to get used to using your machine. I think this is going to be really super helpful if you guys are starting out to learn to draw, do some drawing, do some words, get used to the settings on the machine, and then you guys are going to be unstoppable. Pop back in for our next chapter.